right, before we get started, I'll tell you, last week, Rob was gone. Rob and Dusty both were gone for 4 nights. So, leaving Wednesday morning, they were literally gone for all of this time. And while they were gone, I realized a couple things about myself. I would do nothing, okay? I would never make my bed. I would never get out of bed, probably. I literally was sitting in a chair, and I'm studying, so I mean, it's not like I sit in bed and do nothing, but I literally, that's all I ever do, it feels like. So I was in this chair in our family room, and I was working on lessons for the next couple weeks, and I was so intent on it that Cheyenne FaceTimed me at 7 p.m. at night, and it's dark. And she goes, "Are you in bed?" And I'm like, "No, why would you think that?" And she goes, "It's pitch dark behind you." And I look around, and my entire house is pitch black. I never, ever got up out of there. So, yeah, that would be kind of sad. But the second thing I learned is that I would eat one food group. Yep, there you go. So I have to tell you what I did. Rob left, and I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to make a whole pan of brownies." So I decided that, so Cheyenne would call me and she'd be like, "What are you doing?" As I'm sitting in bed, I'd FaceTime. And literally, there you go. Every time, my brownie pan would get less and less and less. So I decided that I would get on my scale, because I'm like, okay, this is going to be bad. Like, I'm just going to be gaining all this weight. I lost weight. I lost weight eating brownies. And I came up with a conclusion why that was, because I think when you eat so much sugar, nothing else sounds good, and so then you just don't eat. And it's like, oh, I'm either going to have a brownie or nothing, and then it's kind of like nothing ends up happening. So anyway, I called my sister, and I said, "It's a great idea. I'm going to write a book." There's my book cover. The Brownie Diet and Its Lasting Effects by Lisa Leger. All right, so here's what I thought I would do. I would turn this into a book, but the lasting effects, because then I can turn it into a ministry. Because here's my bottom line. If you go on the brownie diet, you're going to die, okay? Earlier than had you not. So then I could share the gospel, and it might work out. So I see what happens when Rob's not there? My mind just goes like ballistic nuts. So anyway, they're back home, so my life is back normal again. Okay, today I want to talk about stress. And I want to talk, and we're going to read something really quick about the Bedouin shepherds. And I'm hoping that by the time this class is done today, you and I can live sort of like the Bedouin shepherds do. Let's read this together. The Bedouin shepherd lives in shabby box tents that dot the hillsides throughout Israel. When compared to our lives, saturated with modern conveniences, it seems as though they live a very difficult life. However, an interesting fact is that their average lifespan is more than 100 years. While the diets are made up of brownies, made up of natural foods which contain no preservatives, that is not the secret to their longevity. The secret lies in their relatively stress-free lives. Stress makes us sick, drives us crazy, kills us some 3 decades before the majority of these shepherds. The Bedouins rise from their tents slightly before sunrise and go about the work of their days. As the sun begins to set, they gather as families in their tents for dinner. Then they will sit around sharing stories and singing. Each evening involves 3 to 4 hours of family time. Could you imagine? Their work is very physical and tiring, but their lives are relatively free from the noise of life. They routinely go to bed at the same time every night, enjoy restful and renewing sleep. As the Bedouins lie down, all is quiet. As they stare up at the clear star-filled sky, their minds are able to focus on the majesty of God, and that is the last thought on their minds as they fall asleep. Do we live like that? No, I don't think so. Here's my thinking. I can't live like that. Like, I have to work, and I have to take the kids to school, and I have to cook dinner and clean house, and there's so many things that we have to do, and then we've got soccer games and dance things, and I can't live a stress-free life like that. It will never happen. This made me laugh. There was a guy who caused someone a lot of stress. He writes this, and he said, "I went to the store the other day. Said I was there for 5 minutes. When I came out, there was a motorcycle cop writing a ticket for someone, a parking ticket. So he said, I went up to him and said, 'Look, how about giving a guy a break here?' And the police officer just ignored him and continued writing the ticket. So the man called him a name. He said, 'You're a pencil-necked Nazi.' And it made the police officer mad, so he wrote him another ticket for bald tires. So then he got even madder, and he said, well, he calls the police officer, you're a horse face. And the police officer is looking at him like, really? So he writes him another ticket. So this went on every time this man said something mean to the police officer, he wrote another ticket for him. The man says this went on for about 20 minutes. He said, but I didn't care because my car was parked around the corner. Okay, so the guy coming out is going to see 5 tickets, and it wasn't even his fault, okay? So there's a lot of stress going on in that. I thought that was funny. You guys did not find that very funny. I thought that was cute. Okay, never mind. Whatever. Anyway, life is filled with stress. And as we've been going through Acts, what we've seen and what we'll see today is everything that Paul and Peter and Silas have been through, like they should be completely overboard in the stress mode in life. But they really weren't. And so today I want to find out, why is it that they never felt stressed over things? So I want to talk about certain things that come in our life that cause us stress. Now, the last lesson when we left off in Acts, we saw Paul wanting to go share the gospel, and he goes one way, and then God stops him and says, no, you can't go that way. And so my thinking is that a lot of stress comes when plans change, when things just happen and you're like, well, I thought I was going to do this and then this doesn't happen. Like when you thought your house was sold and then the buyers backed out. Or let's say when you thought you were supposed to go to that school, but then you didn't get accepted. Or when you thought you were going to marry that guy and then he broke up with you. Or you thought you were going on that vacation, but then someone got sick and now you can't go. See, when plans change in our life, we suddenly feel all this stress coming in. And I want that to stop because we did not see Paul stressed out when things changed in his life. Here's what I realize. Well, there's when plans change. There you go. Stress happens when we have not fully surrendered our lives to God. When we can say it and actually mean it. God, my life is yours. I'm going to go wherever you want me. If you change plans, I'm fine with it. Like really honestly putting him in this big picture. And if we don't do that, then you know what? We're going to always feel stressed. The problem is that when we want things, I want the house to sell, I want the guy, I want the job, I want this, then we really haven't surrendered our will to his will. And when we don't do that, that's what brings stress on. Here's why you never have to be stressed when you give it up, because you're following his lead and not yours. You've given up the ability to say, well, I'm going to go here and go there. Now you're just saying, God, you just lead and I'm going to follow. See, I think for most of us, we're so stressed because we absolutely refuse to give up control. And if you want less stress in your life, you're going to have to give up control. That's kind of the bottom line here. Stress comes too when we focus on the actual problem. I woke up the other morning, Rob came in, a week or so ago, and he said, I was at the office today and we're getting hit with taxes that we had no idea were coming. And I was just like, whoa, how's that going to work? And then on top of that, like our house still hasn't sold. And so I woke up the next morning kind of stressed and feeling a little in the panic mode. But you know what I did? I walked in and I opened my Bible and I started reading. And I said, you know what, God, here's the deal. I'm not going to worry about this. Like you promised to take care of me. I'm your child. I'm not going to worry about these things that, could cause me to stress out. I'm just not going to do it. And as I read the Bible and realized how big and awesome this God is and how much he loves me and is intricately a part of my life, I realized there's nothing that I have to be stressed out about. And so I just say, here you go, God. You're going to figure it out. I'm not going to worry about it. And then you don't. It just kind of happens like that. But you got to be in the Word. You got to know God. You got to know he's that big to be able to handle your problem. So let's pick it up in Acts 16:10. Now after he had seen the vision, immediately we sought to go to Macedonia, concluding that the Lord had called us to preach the gospel to them. Therefore, sailing from Troas, we ran a straight course to Samothrace, wherever that is, and the next day came to Neapolis. And from there to Philippi, which is the foremost city of that part of Macedonia, a colony, and we were staying in that city for some days. Now, I always like to bring you a map so you can see where Paul's been. You see right in the middle there, it says Asia. So we've seen him come, Antioch, Tarsus, Antioch, come up over. Remember last week he thought he wanted to go up towards Bithynia, but God said, no. The man from Macedonia called him. So So now he's across the Aegean Sea, and he's over there, and then you can kind of see where this is going. So Paul is just traveling all over because his whole desire is to get the gospel out. But then he meets somebody, and here's my next point on why people get stressed. People get stressed when people don't change. And you and I both get that. Look at verse 13 here. On the Sabbath day, we went out to the city, to the riverside, where prayers were customarily made. We sat down and spoke to the woman who we met there. Now, a certain woman named Lydia heard us. She was a seller of purple from the city of Thyatira who worshiped God. The Lord opened her heart to heed things spoken by Paul. This is just to remember that when God needs to change someone's heart, he does it. And somehow we get so stressed because we think we have to change that person. There's someone in our life right now that we're so frustrated with. It's like, I'm just like, why are you not changing? Why are you still acting like that? And yet nothing changes, and it can frustrate us until I get to the point of realizing this, that I can't change anyone, and neither can you. You can't change your kid or your mom or your dad or your next door neighbor or your friend. You're not going to be able to change them. But when we see here that the Lord opened her heart, we know one thing, that God is the only one that changes hearts. We see that in Proverbs 21. The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. He directs it like a water course wherever he pleases. It's like people's hearts are in God's hand. He directs them here or directs them there. He's that big. And when we get that, we don't need to worry about trying to change these people. Stress is relieved here. Stress is relieved when we surrender that person to Jesus. When you get to the point of saying, all done, I'm done worrying about you, I'm done stressing over you, I'm not doing it anymore. Here you go, God. You take her, you take him, you deal with it. And then whenever you start feeling anxiety, you just turn back around and say, you know what, God, I'm giving that person back to you again. And you keep giving that person and letting God change them. And he might change them right away, and he might change them in 5 years, and he might change them not even in your lifetime. But it's not for you to worry about. But we become so stressed. Max Lucado, in his book, Grace Happens Here, he talks about when he underwent heart surgery, a heart procedure one time. He said, and only Max can talk like this, he says, my heartbeat had the regularity of a telegraph operator sending Morse code. Okay, that's how he said it. He said, fast, 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 slow, fast, 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 slow. I mean, that's how his heart was. He said, so the doctor tried to give him medicine and make it work, but nothing worked. So the doctor came and told him, you need to have a catheter ablation. And so the plan was this. He would insert 2 cables into his heart via a blood vessel. Amazing what they can do. 1 camera and then an ablation tool. An ablation tool would burn, cauterize, singe, and brand. That's what the plan was for his heart. So he said, the doctor said this, if all went well, he said he would destroy the misbehaving parts of my heart. So as Max is getting ready to go into surgery, the doctor said, is there any questions you have, last questions before you go under? And Max said this, he said, you're burning the interior of my heart, right? And he said, yes. He said, so you intend to kill all the misbehaving cells, right? And he said, yes. And Max said this, as long as you're there, could you maybe take a blowtorch to some of my greed, my selfishness, my superiority, my guilt? Can you just take those things and singe them out of my heart so I don't have them anymore? And the doctor smiled and said, I'm so sorry, but that's out of my pay grade. Okay. But it was out of his pay grade, but it's never out of God's pay grade. He's in the business of changing heart. And so that's what I'm saying. There's no need to stress. You need to go to God in prayer every time you're worried about that person or think about that person and just say, God, they're yours. I'm really and truly giving them to you. It's not your job to change them. Verse 15, and when she and her household were baptized, she begged us, saying, if you have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come to my house and stay. So she persuaded us. Now, the next place that stress comes is this, when people annoy us, all right? And really, our stress level goes way up, and you guys have it. You have that person in your life, that friend, that, or whatever, the non-friend, and they are driving you nuts. And you just don't even know what to do with it. And every time they walk in the door, you see them, your stress level goes way up, and we're just like, yeah, we don't want to do that. Same list, children, spouse, boss, neighbor, whoever it is comes along, and they begin to annoy you. We're going to see what Paul does with this. Now it happened, as we went to prayer, that a certain slave girl, possessed with a spirit of divination, met us, who brought her masters much profit by fortune telling. This girl followed Paul and us and cried out, saying, "These men are the servants of the Most High God, who proclaim to us the way of salvation." And she did this for many days. But look at Paul. Paul was greatly annoyed. Now, you don't picture the Apostle Paul annoyed. See, sometimes we think these guys are such spiritual giants that they never did anything wrong. And we look at them like, well, they were just the most loving people and the most patient people, and they always trusted God, and they prayed about everyone and never got annoyed. And here you have the Apostle Paul, who had a moment where he was very, very annoyed. We see this all through the Bible. I was just talking to Chris this morning, and we were talking about, do you think the early church had all this strife in it? And I kind of think that it probably did. It shouldn't. I mean, we should be the most loving, kind, compassionate people around. I don't know what's wrong with us that we aren't. But we saw this when Barnabas and Paul split up over John Mark. Like, that was a big, huge split up. So we see that. We saw it when Peter wouldn't sit down with the Gentiles, and Paul was like furious with him. And here we see Paul annoyed because of a demon-possessed girl who was following around and just talking all the time to him and saying things, and Paul was really frustrated. Here's what we need to understand is that Paul was frustrated until one thing, until he realized she could not help how she was acting. I think when you and I become stressed over the people in our life, we need to stop and we need to do this. We need to see the root of why they act the way they do. I was just yesterday, I was meeting someone for lunch, and I was way early, so I went to McDonald's, sat there in McDonald's, and this man and this elderly lady sat right in front of me. And I'm telling you what, the lady brought him his food, and he freaked out, like literally freaked out. Like, I'm thinking he's going to go like McDonald's on us all, okay, or whatever, postal McDonald's, whatever you want to call it. But he was so angry and screaming at the top of his lungs, and this poor little lady that was with him, like, broke my heart. I didn't even know what to say. And the lady yelled back at him, and it was just this horrible, horrible scene. But after doing this lesson, I stopped to think, what is making him like that? What in him, other than maybe he's just got a mental illness, I don't know. But my heart wasn't angry with him. My heart was sad because of what he has become in this fallen world, and that broke my heart. But I think we have to take that, like, why is it that your boss yells? Why is it that your neighbor cares more for his yard than he does you? Why is it that your husband just doesn't really communicate very well with you? Why is that girl a prostitute? Why is that guy a drug addict? Why is that person such a freaking jerk? Okay, like, I don't know the answer to that. Maybe it's how they were raised. Maybe something really traumatic happened in their life. We just saw this the other night. We were watching the BTK killer documentary. I don't know if you saw it or not. But there's one guy on there that, you know, at the court when they finally got the guy, and he had killed this one woman, and the son of this woman was in the court, and every time they interviewed him, he's like, I just want him dead, I just want to kill him, and he's destroyed my life, and he was so angry. And I kept thinking, how sad that you've never gotten over this. Well, here's the deal. At 5, he peeks through the door as this guy is literally murdering his mother. I don't know how you get over something like that. And so I understand why now he's so angry and he could never get on with his life. And so you have to look that this is a fallen world where sad things happen. But what if we could start looking at people a little bit differently and not being so angry and mad at them all the time because of the way maybe their parents cut them down all the time. Maybe they just seek your attention because they never got any. Like, there's always a reason why you're annoyed by somebody. But I think if we take a step back and say, wait a minute, why are they acting like that? And then look at them from that vantage point. Because for this girl that was annoying Paul, she was kind of like, she was demon-possessed, and she was making money for like a pimp. She was like a slave. And Paul's annoyed with her, but I think everything changed when he started realizing, wait a minute, this girl has a serious problem that I need to help her. So I think we need to maybe change things. Now, we're going to read something together, and I'm going to tell you this right off the bat. This has really bad language in it. I took the bad language out and put ... Every time you see a ... that is probably the F word. I'm just telling you that right now. A pastor wrote this. It is, and I couldn't even, I stopped even reading it because every time I got to the end, I literally started crying. Because it's this point that I want you to see is that there's reasons why people are the way they are. And I get that they annoy us, but we got to start thinking compassion and love for people and understanding where they come from. So I hope nobody is offended at this. Gary Liederbach, he's the pastor of One Direction Community. It's so cute, though. He doesn't call himself the lead pastor. He calls himself the lead follower. And I love that. It's like right off the bat, you see his humility. So we're going to read this story together, and you can just add in the words your own self. My morning office is in the Waffle House. 3 months ago, I went into the Waffle House. I sat in a chair at the low bar, the bar you can sit that's the normal chair height. I did not notice the used coffee cup that was in the bar in the back next to the menu rack in front of the chair I sat in. It belonged to a man I will call Chuck, who happened to have gone outside to smoke a morning cigarette. Chuck is a man who comes frequently to the Waffle House. He's rough and a crude man in his late 60s. He cusses a lot, gives the waitresses and customers a hard time. He's sharp with them when he is in that mood. Chuck walked back into the Waffle House and sitting in his chair walked up and said, "Hey, blank, you are in my seat." I turned to him, and before I could even say a word, the two waitresses who were standing there almost jumped over the bar and verbally attacked Chuck. One said, "Now you listen here, you blank. This man here is a blankin' man of God. And if you ever talk to him like that again, I will kick your blank." The other waitress jumped in and said, "Yeah, you blank. He is my blankin' pastor." What the blank is wrong with you? Show some blank respect. Okay, you get the drift here. This was a big conversation, okay? The waitresses high-fived each other, and one of them said, "Sword of the Spirit be," okay? Chuck turned and walked out. Here's what the pastor said. I sat there and processed what had just happened. First, the waitresses have never come to an ODC gathering, his church, the church he pastors. Though I've invited them many times, I never told the waitresses I was their pastor. But because of my coming into the Waffle House 4 or 5 mornings a week and talking, listening, and praying with them, it appears that's how they saw me. The other day, the waitresses were talking about how life seemed to be attacking them. So I took out my phone and read to them Ephesians 6 about the armor of God and explained it to them. And the one waitress shouting, "Sword of the Spirit be," shows that they were listening and retaining what I told them. I just need to work a little more on their application of that verse. Fast forward to a month ago. I was walking in the Waffle House, and Chuck was outside in the front smoking. I said good morning to him as I was walking by, and Chuck kind of quietly and nicely, especially for Chuck, asked if I had a moment. I told him I'm sure and stopped by. He said quietly as he looked at the ground, "I know you're kind of a religious guy and it's not that big of a deal, but I was wondering if you could pray for me for something." I said, "Sure, what's up?" He went on to say that the doctors think he may have prostate cancer, and he had a test today to confirm it. I said, "Of course," but before I could say anything else, he opened up and told me a story for about 10 minutes. The short summary of it was that he used to go to church a long time ago and was kind of close to God. Then he was drafted to Vietnam to fight in the war. He said he did some things there he was not proud of, things that God could not forgive him for. He said in attacks on villages, he shot and killed enemy soldiers who were just kids, also women and elderly. He saw children killed and witnessed and participated in other atrocities of war. He stopped praying after the war and has never gone back to church since he came back to the States. When I asked to pray with him there, he said no. He had to leave, but for me to pray as you feel God will listen. As he walked out, my heart both mourned for him and was convicted for me. I had joined in him with the others at the Waffle House at times, commenting on Chuck and his behavior. However, the reason Chuck was angry and hurtful man is he was filled with guilt that separated him from God. Guilt from things he did he thought were not forgivable. And I thought, I know, and I preach that God can forgive anything. But I have never put him to the test of his forgiveness like Chuck has to. If I was the one looking down an M16, watching bullets splatter bodies of kids and women from my gun and trigger I was pulling, the event might make me an even bigger, hate-filled, guilt-filled jerk than Chuck. It reminded me that people are never the enemy. Please remember that. People are never the enemy. Fast forward to yesterday morning. was in the Waffle House at the bar talking with customers, the waitresses, when Chuck walked in. He walked over to the sidebar. He never sits in by himself and sat down. No cussing, no loud comments to people as he came in the restaurant. He looked devastated. One of the waitresses said they heard his son had died the previous night. My spirit told me to go sit in the chair next to him, and I did. I said good morning to him, and he said hey, and his eyes began to fill with tears. I told him I had heard that his son had died, and if it was true, and I was so sorry. We talked again for 20 minutes. Summary, he told me his son was 31 years old. Some of his friends, Chuck and Chuck's wife, his son's mother, were on the front porch talking. His son told his friends how he just bought a new pistol. They asked to see it. He went into his truck, got it out, removed the clip, thought the gun was empty. It was not. He came back to the porch and handing the gun to his friend when somehow it went off and the bullet hit his son in the head from less than 2 feet away. They rushed him to the hospital, but he died a few hours after he arrived. Chuck said he and his wife witnessed it, and he could not get the sight out of his mind. It reminded him of the war. He had to come home from the hospital and clean his son's blood and hair and other parts from the side of his house and porch. Tears were flowing down his face. He asked me if this was God's punishment for the kids he killed in Vietnam. Of course not, and we talked a while. His son had a wife and 2 kids, 8 and 10. After we finished, I went home, my wife, and I took the chicken I had grilled for dinner along with the sides, bread and dessert, put it in a box and took it up to the Waffle House. I wrote a note to the family stating I was praying for them and asking to let me know if I could help in any way. My phone number was on it and put it in boxes. Pulled into the Waffle House just in time as Chuck was walking to his car to leave. I parked, got the box, and gave it to him. Chuck teared up again as he took it. He said I didn't have to do that, but I insisted, so I told him I was praying for him, and I left. Fast forward to today. I received a call today from Chuck. He thanked me for the food. He said that he and his family do not have any money. They're getting the cheapest cremation they can and just going to do a remembrance services at their home. Their family does not attend church. They do not know how many church people, let alone preachers, and he asked if I would be willing to come to their house and share from the Bible and some words over their son and their family. I told him I would be honored. He said, I've been going to the Waffle House regularly for 3 years. Sometimes I wondered if I needed to continue going. Only 1 or 2 people, employees or customers, have ever come to an ODC gathering. So if you go by traditional church metrics, my time investment has not led to church growth or increased numbers in the pews. It has not resulted in 1 penny going into our offertory plate or pastor support. Yet God reminded me of my prayer, saying to him every morning, which is, God, please send me today the ones that no one else wants. No one wanted Chuck. Even I found it hard to be around him. But God, through just being faithful, has given me an amazing opportunity to be welcomed into his house, a circle of family and friends that no other pastor has ever been invited into, and share the love of God with them. And that is my heart's desire, not to see them as an evangelistic projector opportunity, but a family in pain that simply needs the love of God and to love them. I pray I may honor this. My ODC family and all of us here, I pray today that you will be led by the Holy Spirit not to seek and enter into some structured ministry with people, but just simply enter into lives and the lives of people. That in your daily set schedule, you allow and come to expect, even long for, interruptions from 2 things, God and people. See, the problem with you and I is we come in contact with people all day long. They cut us off in traffic. They cut us, take cuts in lines that we're standing in the grocery store, and they just come up and without any thought to us. We see people that yell at their little league, at the little league coaches. We see people that scream at their employees. We look around and see women gossiping about other people. We just go, why are these people doing this? And so often we just get annoyed with them instead of stopping and saying, wait a minute, maybe I need to pray for that person. Maybe I need to ask them lovingly, are you okay? Can I help you? What can I do? I so desperately wanted to go up to this man and woman yesterday at McDonald's. I didn't even know what to say. I was afraid he was going to hit me, actually. But I really honestly did not know what to say in a situation like that. But see, I think that if we could start looking at the people who annoy us completely differently and say, you know what, there's something going on in their lives that I cannot see. I don't know what's underneath that. And we see this with this story in spades. Love and grace and compassion has to come from us if we're followers of Jesus. Just like he said, he just started talking, about Chuck and gossiping about him with all the women, and he got very convicted. We got to stop that. We have to be different. We see this with Paul. He suddenly realized that this woman was like a slave to these people who were using her to get money. And along with that, she was demon-possessed. Verse 18 said this, "And this she did for many days, but Paul, greatly annoyed, turned and said," I think he finally realized it, and he said, "I command you in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her." And he came out at that very moment. Here's another place that stress comes from. Paul just did something good. He just took a woman who needed desperately to be released from a demon, and here's where stress comes: doing the right thing and getting in trouble. Some of you do the right thing. For Paul, he just saved this girl's life. He released a demon out of her. But Paul got in a whole lot of trouble and felt a lot of pain and embarrassment after he did that. Verse 19, "But when her masters saw that their hope of profit was gone, they seized Paul and Silas, dragged them into the marketplace to the authorities, and they brought them to the magistrates and said, 'These men, being Jews, exceedingly trouble our city, and they teach customs which are not lawful for us, being Romans, to receive or observe.' Then the multitude rose up against them." Get a load of this. "The magistrates tore off their clothes and commanded them to be beaten with rods. And when they had laid many stripes on them, they threw them into prison, commanding the jailer to be keeping them securely. Having received such a charge, he put them in the inner prison and fastened their feet in stocks." See, some of you, we don't get that. For us, it looks a little like this: I did something nice for you, but you turned on me. I loved and cared for my husband for 40 years, and he walked out and married that younger girl. I'm still a little angry over Garth Brooks and Kevin Costner, like these women that stayed with them until they got famous, and then these men leaving them. It just makes me so mad. I'm just like, I can't imagine being that wife and seeing your husband's career with the other woman. Like, how horrible. And you're just like, all I did was the right thing, and I helped my husband build his, career or whatever it is. And some of you get that. You put your husband through law school or to become a doctor, and then he leaves you. You do something good and you don't get anything back in return. Some of you pour your life into your children, and then they move away and you're like, what just happened? I just spent 18, 20 years and spending millions of dollars on you, okay? And you leave and don't call? And that hurts. You trust your best friend and you find out she's gossiping behind your back. How about you lie? You don't lie at work. Your boss says, I need you to lie for me. And you're like, I'm not lying for you. You do the right thing, and you get fired. It happens all the time. It just happened here. We see it in the Old Testament with Joseph. Like, he loves God, but his boss's wife thinks he's super hot, so she wants to have sex with him. So she calls him in there, and he runs. He runs from her, and he said, I could never, ever do this, not only to your husband, but to my God. And he does the right thing, but she lies. And he goes to prison for years, all because he did the right thing. See, Paul and Silas did something really good by this woman, and look how humiliated they had to have been. Their clothes were torn off of them. That's embarrassing. We moved to New River. And my brother-in-law, I can't remember if I told you this or not. We moved to New River, and we were having this conversation, and he said, oh, that's so funny. Did you know you have a nudist colony out there? And I'm like, no, we don't. He goes, no, there really is. It's a nudist colony. It's called Shangri-La. And I was like, ooh, why does that name seem familiar? Okay. So he said, yeah. He goes, when we moved to Arizona, 20 years ago or whatever it was, he said, we drove into this, it was like a trailer place, I guess. He drove in there for the night, and he said, I was under my truck fixing it, and I heard a voice, and I came out from under the truck, and there was this woman standing there stark naked, okay? And he's like, what is this? Okay, and then he realized later that this is Shangri-La. It is literally a nudist colony. So if you knew my brother-in-law, it was just kind of cute. So I'm driving to my house after he tells us that, and we have to go up this hill to get to our house. And as I drive up, I look to the right, and there's a big sign, Shangri-La 2. Okay? And I'm like, I live down the road less than a mile from a nudist colony. Okay, I had no idea, which is so kind of funny. And so we stopped by this little church to do something one day out by our house, and we got to talking about Shangri-La. And so I was talking to the lady, and I said, do they really honestly run around naked? And she goes, oh, yeah. She goes, they have tours every day from 3 to 5. You should go. And I'm like, I'm not going to see tours of Shangri-La. And so I go, I can't believe people run around naked. I said, I won't even wear a bathing suit. Okay, we're not going there. And I said, then not only that, I'd be freezing cold all the time. Like I'm always in blankets. So we were joking with Dusty, and I said, do you want to go take a tour? And he's like, ooh. He goes, it's probably filled with 100-year-old men. And he said, I do not want to see how my future, like what my future is going to look like. But my sister said this to me, and it made me laugh. Why are clothes so expensive? I shouldn't have to pay to not be naked. People should be paying me to not be naked. I thought that was great. Last week it was like so cold out. And so I was getting ready to drive up that hill where Shangri-La's on the right. And there was this man, literally, like, thank the Lord he had pants on, but he had nothing else on. And it's freezing cold, and he's like, and I'm just like, I guess when you walk in there, he's allowed to take off his pants. I don't know. I just blocked my eyes on that one. But anyway, but for Paul, this was not a nudist colony. This was not something that normally people did, see you naked. But I can't imagine what Paul and Silas were going through at this time, because they just got stripped and beaten, and they're in front of all these people. I can't imagine how humiliated they were. And then they got thrown into prison where, here you go, their feet were put in stocks. See, you and I, we just don't get that. That is a stressful day. See, you and I think stress is this. What do you mean my McDonald's hamburger isn't going to be ready in a minute? What do you mean I have to pull up and go around the corner and sit for 3 minutes? Like, that's just too stressful for me. Like, that is our stress life in America. We think stress is when we look at the weather and it's like, oh, my party, and it's going to rain. Like, all this stress comes upon us. We think stress is when, you laugh. Whenever I come and see that sign on the door out here that says, yoga class canceled, the women are so stressed. It's like, you can't cancel my class today. It's like all this stress that comes in your life because of your yoga class. We think stress is when our Little League kids team doesn't win. And it's just all this American stress is what we'll call it. I thought this was cute. There was a lady, she said that stress is not always something negative, but sometimes it could be something positive. So this article was written. It said, for this reason, Donna Parker hesitated about telling her husband that they won the $4 million Reader's Digest sweepstakes. So she was ecstatic. She got a call. They said they're sending a check for $4 million or whatever. But she did not know how to tell her husband because her husband just got out of the hospital. He had had a massive heart attack, and the doctor said, no excitement whatsoever. You cannot tell him. See, good news brings on stress too. So she didn't know what to do, so she called her pastor. And she said, Pastor, I don't know what to do. Let me know here, because you deal with people in stressful situations all the time. So he said, all right, I'll be over in about an hour. So he comes in, and her husband, Mike's sitting there watching TV. And he sits down, and he said, hey, Mike, he said, I have a problem, and I need your advice. Mike said, sure, what can I do? And he said, well, it's kind of this theoretical situation. He said, it's kind of regarding Christian stewardship. He said, what if a person, let's just take you, for instance, what would you do if you found out that you had won $4 million? What would you do with all that money? And Mike said, well, that's easy. I'd first start by giving $2 million of it to the church, whereupon the pastor had a heart attack and died. Oh, there you go. So here's my question. How do you handle stress? Do you get angry? Do you take that extra drink or that extra pill? Or do you go shopping and run your credit cards up? Or do you yell at everyone and kick the dog? Here's what Paul's answer to stress is right here. Oh, no, not there. Here. Praise. There you go. Praise. Like, that's how you get past it. Here's the deal. Paul has experienced real stress, like I said, not Americanized stress that you and I. And look what happens in verse 25 there. Remember, they'd just been beaten, naked, in stocks. That would hurt. And look what they're doing. But at midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God. And the prisoners were listening to them. Isn't that amazing? How many of us would be like whining and angry and crying and mad at God? Most of us would be at that place. I want to read this comments about Paul in the Philippian jail from Desire by Vesta Magnum. One of the greatest stories ever written was when Paul and Silas were in Philippi with swollen ankles, bleeding backs, beaten with rods, in a rat-infested inner prison. Apparently, that's a good platform for revival. Really let that sink in. That's a good platform for revival. When everything in your world is just falling apart, that's the best time to be like, you know what? We're going to have a church meeting and thank Jesus. Apparently, that's a good time to write history. Did you hear them grumbling? Did you hear them criticizing everyone else? Did you hear them running about everyone else down? Did you hear them talking or complaining? Paul said, we will not look at our difficulties. We will not measure the height of these walls. Neither will we look at any of this. The inner prison was indescribable, but Paul said, I will remember the Lord God who split the Red Sea, and he is the God of the cloud and the fire. I know that I cannot curse the darkness. There is only one thing that can take care of the darkness. I will light a little torch. Let's sing. I know it's midnight, but I'm going to use everything I have. My hands are in stocks. My feet are in bonds. I'm beaten, but I can wiggle my fingers and toes. I have a mouth. I'm not going to wait for big things. I'm not going to wait for the moment. They turned a place of torture into a cathedral and set the city and continent ablaze. The man responsible was a handcuffed man, a chained man, but pushed back the horizon. Write history, even if it's not time to write history. Bound, contemptible, weak physically, yet he shook the Roman Empire. It was this little man who said, none of these things move me. In other words, imagine what we could do if we could do this. To say nothing is going to stress me out. Those are the times in my life when I'm going to praise and thank God. For some of you, it's like, you're like, well, you don't understand. I lost my job and we have no food in the house. All right. How about getting your kids together and praying and thanking God that he's going to provide for you? And saying, you know what, kids, I don't know how God's going to provide, but he promises to take care of me, so I'm going to trust him. Let's thank him for that. Some of you have no job. And you're like, I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills. And you sit around and you say, instead of crying and whining and worrying about it, you stop and you say, you know what, God, thank you that somehow you have a job prepared for me. I do that with our house. Most of you know we've moved out, it's painted, it's ready for a buyer. And yet, that's not happening right now. And I know we can't do this forever, but my prayer is this in the morning: God, interest rates are going up. Home values are going down. We have this weird, unique property that most people don't want because it's too unique for them. But God, here's what I do know. You are a big God. And you know what? You parted the Red Sea and you rose Jesus from the grave. And with that kind of a God, you can sell our house. And so I'm thanking you in advance that you're preparing a buyer and you're going to bring him along right at the right time. I'm not going to worry and stress about it. See how that works? It just does. See, in God's economy, none of that stuff matters. I don't have a job, I don't have money, I don't have this. It doesn't matter. Trust him that he will take care of that for you. I had lunch with a friend who's from Texas, and we'd gone on a trip with some of her friends before, and I said, hey, how's their house going? Because the friends of theirs were building a house, and she goes, you're going to love this story. She goes, they're building their house. It's going to be done in like April, May, whatever. She goes, but they have this house, kind of like ours. Weird house. It's got an office building, part of the house. It's got horse property. It's just this really odd place. She said, they're like, I don't know how we're ever going to sell this place. And she said, so all of a sudden they get a phone call one day, a week or so ago, and a new guy moved into the house next door. They didn't know him. The people next door to him called these people and said, hey, I just talked to your neighbor. He wants to buy your house. So they called the neighbor, and he said, yeah. He goes, I just have all this cash that I have to put somewhere. And he said, so here's what I want to do. I want to buy your house. You can live there as long as you want. Your horses, they can stay there indefinitely. I'm not charging you anything. I don't care. I'm doing this for an investment. You can just stay, but we have to close in 13 days. 13 days. And they're like, who does that? I'm like, God. That's how big he is. And I know God's going to do that with our house. I don't know when, but I know he will, and that's what we're trusting and believing, and we're praising him in the midst of it. Here's what we're doing. We're looking to him with praise for what he will do. When you're stressed about a situation, that's where we need to go. Imagine if your friends and your relatives and your neighbors saw you act like that. Whatever, God's got this. I don't need to stress. He's going to take care of the details for me. Do you think people in this stressed out world would take notice of your life and mine if we did that? And then when they ask you, like, why are you not worried about that? You're like, I don't know. You know what? I'm a follower of Jesus. I'm a child of the Most High King. And you know what? He's going to take care of, I'm part of his family. Why would I worry? See what happens when God becomes so big in your life? That's what happens. You don't stress, and people around you see. And we see this with Paul and Silas. They're in this horrible prison, and the guards are there, and they're hearing them singing and worshiping, and the guards aren't used to that. They're used to hearing whimpering and crying and being spit on. How do you think it affected those people in prison? I think it had a huge effect on their life. We see it here in verse 26. Suddenly, there was a great earthquake, so that the foundations of the prison were shaken, and immediately all the doors were open and everyone's chains were loosened. That's the kind of God that you and I have in our life right there. A miraculous God that can even bring on an earthquake to get Paul out of prison if need be. And the keeper of the prison, awaking from sleep and seeing the prison doors open, supposing the prisoners had fled, drew his sword and was about ready to kill himself. But Paul called with a loud voice and said, "Do yourself no harm, for we are all here." And they called for a light, ran in, and fell down trembling before Paul and Silas. Why would the keeper, the prison guard, fall down trembling in front of Paul and Silas? And I believe it's because he saw something completely different than any of us have ever acted like before, probably. He saw them happy and excited and no issues with what was going on in their life. They were different. They handled their stress different. And when this guard heard them singing, he's like, wait a minute, something's different with these guys. I want what they have. See, you and I need to live a life that people want what we have. Verse 30, and he brought them out and said, "Sir, what do I have to do to be saved?" How awesome is that? What do I need to, I see your life. I want what you have. What do I need to do to be saved? Wouldn't it be fun if people did that all the time with us? Like they just see your life and how you act and they're like, I just want, how do I get what you have? I mean, that's what our goal should be. Paul says this, believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and you will be saved, you and your household. Now, a lot of people say, oh, well, that just means if my grandpa's saved, then I'm saved because I'm part of his household. That's not what that means, FYI. Each person, we know that, is responsible for their own salvation. I think what Paul's trying to say is, look, when your family sees what Jesus did and who he is, they're all going to get saved too. But I love what Paul says. One way, Jesus alone, end of story. Believe on Jesus. He doesn't say, well, Mr. Prison Guard, you need to go clean up your act. You know what? You need to stop watching porn. You need to quit getting drunk every night. You need to start going to church, read your Bible. And when you start doing all those things, then come back to me and we'll talk. He doesn't say that. And it's such a valid point for you and I to know whatever you're going through, that's the first step. Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ. Because when you do that, the Holy Spirit comes into your life, and then when he comes into your life, he's going to start cleaning house. You will not be able to live like you used to. You used to cuss all the time. Yep, you're not going to get away with that very much. You used to drink all the time. Yeah, because suddenly you're feeling this conviction of the Holy Spirit, and you're like, wait a minute, I'm a follower of Jesus. I can't act like that anymore. I want people to see me as a light. Then they spoke the word of the Lord to him and all who were in his house. And then the prison guard gets compassion. He took them the same hour of the night, washed their stripes. Immediately he and all his family were baptized. When he brought them into his house, he set food before them and he rejoiced, having believed in God with all of his household. Here's what you and I need to know. Stressful situation open doors for people to hear about Jesus. But you and I have to look differently about our stressful situations, and we need to focus on God instead of our problem. And when we can do that, we can be a light to those around us. You have a choice in life. If you are going to let stress run your life, you will have no impact for Jesus. You just won't, because you will be no different than your stressed out non-Christian neighbor. And even like the stripping, the beating, being thrown in prison, the negative circumstances, Paul and Silas were different. They praised God. They sang. They worshiped because they wanted people to know that they were different. They stopped feeling sorry for themselves. If you're here and you're feeling sorry for yourself, you need to stop it. You need to start focusing on him. And what happened and what we see here is Paul and Silas were all in. All in. They understood that I have to surrender my life. That's what it means to be a follower of Jesus, to say, God, I'm all in. My life is yours. Most Christians are about 10% in. This made me laugh. This was an alleged New Year's letter written from a church member to a pastor. Here's what he said. Dear pastor, you often stress attendance at worship as being very important for a Christian. But I think, American Christianity, we'll go here, I think a person has a right to miss now and then. And I think every person ought to be excused for the following reasons and the number of times indicated. We should be excused for Christmas holidays, the Sunday before and after. 2, New Year's, the party lasted too long. 1, Easter, got to get away for the holidays. 2, 4th of July, national holiday. 1. See, these are the times they shouldn't be going to church. And he's saying, we need to be excused from church. Labor Day, need to get away. 2. Memorial Day, visit hometown folk. 1. School closing, kids need a break. 1. School reopens, one last fling. 1. Family reunions, mine and the wife's, we need 3 Sundays for that. Sleep late, stayed up too late Saturday night. 9. We need 9 buys for that. Deaths in the family, 2. Anniversary, 1. Sickness, 5. Business trip, 1. Vacation, 6. Bad weather, ball games, races, the list goes on. Unexpected company, time changes, TV, specials on TVs like the Super Bowl, like we can't go to church for that. The pastor, that leaves 2 Sundays per year that we'll be there. So you can count on us to be in church on the 4th Sunday in February and the 3rd Sunday in August unless we are providentially hindered. Sincerely, a faithful member, okay? and that made me laugh because I'm like, yeah, here's the problem with that. That's not a faithful anything, okay? But Paul and Silas understood what it meant to be faithful followers of Jesus. And they understood that when you are a faithful follower of Jesus, you will be thrown with so many things in your life. Persecution from other people, anger for, that you're not going along with what the culture's saying. But here's what they do. They didn't let that bother them, and they let their stress point other people to God. Here's our last thing here. God uses stress to move us where he needs us. God will use stress in your life to move you. I was talking to someone one day, it just dawned on me the other day when I was putting this together. I was talking to this guy one time, and I said, how did you get into ministry? And he said, you're not going to believe this. He said, I had a painting company with my friend. And he said, I was doing ministry on the weekends because I love to do ministry stuff. And he said, I was painting on the weekdays. He said, a man came to me and said, I am going to give you $100,000 a year for the next 3 years. I need you to quit your painting job, and I need you to go full-time into ministry and writing and doing all the things that you need to do, and I will be your benefactor or whatever that is for the next 3 years. And he said, year 4, he said, we'll just revisit it, and I'll give you a raise if you need one. So this guy goes in, he sells his painting company, or I think he just gives it to the guy, his partner. He goes off. First month is fine. Second month, his benefactor dropped dead of a heart attack at 52 years old. And he's sitting here going, what am I going to do? I just gave away my company. And so he goes to the wife and he's like, hey, what's happening here? And she's like, oh, yeah, I'm sorry. That was his deal, not mine. Nothing. But here's what happened. You can imagine the stress that came on this guy's life when this happened. But what happens is stress moved him to where God needed him. And now he's full-time ministry, and it's the coolest thing, all because of stress, a very stressful situation that forced him to trust God and forced him that God would be big enough for all of that. I can't believe we have to go. We have to get through this really quick, 5 seconds. Let's just read this. When it was day, the magistrates sent the officers saying, let the men go. So the keeper of the prison reported these words to Paul, saying, the magistrates have said to let you go. Therefore depart, go in peace. Paul said to them, they have beaten us openly, uncondemned Romans, and have thrown us into prison. And now they put us out secretly? No, indeed, let them come themselves and get us out. And the officers told these words to the magistrates, and they were afraid when they heard that they were Romans. Then they came and pleaded with them and brought them out and asked them to depart the city. So they went out of the prison and entered the house of Lydia. When they had seen the brethren, they were encouraged them, and they departed. When they had traveled through these places in Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where there was a synagogue of Jews. What we see here is that God used the stress of what happened in Philippi to move them to continue on and share the gospel. I want us to end today knowing that There's a story in the Bible with King David. And we'll just do this really quick because this is a really big story. Happened when David was in living with the Philistines. He shouldn't have been because the Philistines are enemies of Israel. But David needed God to move. He needed David to get back to Israel where he was supposed to be so God could make him king. But he was living with the Philistines and he shouldn't have been. He was doing everything wrong at this particular time. So God needed to move him. Then it happened when David and his men came to Ziklag on the third day. The Amalekites had made a raid on the Negev and on Ziklag and had overthrown Ziklag and burned it with fire. And they took captive the women and all who were both small and great without killing anyone, carried them off. When David and his men came to the city, it was burned with fire. Their wives and their sons and their daughters had been taken captives. Imagine the stress for David. He comes upon his city and finds out his wife and his children have been kidnapped and his entire home is burned to the ground. And how terrifying that was for him. Then David and the people who were with him lifted their voices and wept until there was no more strength in them to weep. Imagine the stress that David was feeling. Now, David's 2 wives had been taken captive. Moreover, David was greatly distressed because the people spoke of stoning him, for all the people were embittered, each one because of his sons and daughters. Imagine, everyone hates David. I'm mad at you. How could you bring me here? My daughters, my family. You did this, David. Like stress. But look what David did. He strengthened himself in the Lord, his God. David took a stressful day and said, I am not going to listen to those around me. I'm going to strengthen myself in God. So here's our answer to stress. Surrender your life completely to Jesus. And some of you go, well, I've already done that. I go to church. This is not a church thing. This is a God, what does it mean to follow you thing? I'm giving you my life. And wherever you lead me, I'm following. And if it's a stressful day, I'm going to praise you and worship you, which is the second thing. Always look to him with praise for what he will do. Stop looking at the problem, but start looking at stress in your life as a way to step out and trust him and be a witness to those around you. Father, thank you for your word. Thank you for seeing Paul's life and everything that he's gone through. God, help us living in the United States of America, where things are so easy for us and we get so stressed out over the dumbest things. God, help us to stop. Help us to start looking at stress from a good vantage point that says, look, I'm stressed. I'm going to be a witness because I want other people to see Jesus in me. I pray that, God, desperately for all of us. In Jesus' name, amen.